Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Tuesday afternoon. On the show today, we will get in to Big 12 basketball. Texas takes on their sixth ranked team in a row tonight. We will break that down, get you ready for the game. The other Big 12 action, the Big 12 upset that happened last night. We will get you into all of that. We'll also talk a little NBA as the trade deadline looms on a Thursday. National Signing Day is tomorrow. It shouldn't affect the Longhorns too much as most of their guys did the early signing, but it is National Signing Day tomorrow, so we'll talk a little college football as well. And, of course, the Super Bowl is this weekend, so we'll get into that. And, of course, as always, whatever you guys want to talk about on the text line, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. Whatever you guys want to talk about, you guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. So you send in the text. We try to get to everyone on the show and get you guys conversation rolling. I know we got Super Bowl week coming up. We're getting into it now, and I'm excited for a good game. I'm hoping it's going to be good with two good teams, but I'm curious on you guys' take. I love hearing different takes of why this game is going to be different, or who's going to be the standout star, or why this team is flawed from the beginning and can't work, or all of that. You can go ahead and send that in on the text line, and we'll get to them, and we'll get into that. We'll get more into the NFL in the 5 o'clock hour, more football. We'll talk basketball in the 4 o'clock for you here. Looking at, we'll get into the big fat poll of the day too, which is somewhat Super Bowl related as we get into, we don't have to talk always the most serious sports here. We can have fun on the Sports Complex as well. It was a good day. I'm trying to find out my gym schedule now. So I'm trying to figure out with everything going of how late I can go because there's less people there. And I'm still not 100% sure on all gym etiquette that's there. I think I'm doing pretty good about it. But, I don't know the gym etiquette of if there's someone on the machine and they're just taking forever. And I know I'm not a machine, but I'm not trying to put on a lot of weight. I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm just trying to do easy stuff, right? But there'd be someone on there, and you're like, okay, well, I'll just kind of wait. They can't be on there long. And then it's 10 minutes later, you go do something else, you get some water, you go to the bathroom, you come back, and they're still there, just kind of on their phone, or they're walking around, but their stuff's still there, and they haven't cleaned it. Is there a proper way to be like, hey, man, if you could, there's 150 people in the gym right now, maybe – Is there proper gym etiquette to slowly nudge somebody to just be like, hey, you're not allowed to you shouldn't just be there. Maybe you're allowed, I don't know. But you shouldn't just stay at one thing for 30 minutes if you're not even really using it. Let some other people and go walk around and then, come back to it a little bit later. I don't know what the gym etiquette is. I'm trying to figure it out myself. But while I was at the gym, I was watching the Kansas K-State overtime game, and it was a big upset again, and it shows you how hard it is to win on the road in the Big 12. Kansas gets a loss, 75-70. It goes to overtime. They're fighting throughout the entire game, and then Tyler Perry really stepped it up. 26 points in the game. 8 of his 26 were in overtime. He was a guy who really stepped it up at the end. In the end of the game, what ends up happening is K-State hits their free throws. Kansas does not. Kevin McCullough Jr. Went down by 2. Kansas gets the rebound on a missed Kansas State shot. He gets fouled in the rebound. Dak's going to the other side for 1-1. Can tie it up on the free throw line. K-State's not terribly upset. Even if they tie it up, it means they can come back down and take the final shot, and it goes to double overtime or they win. So they're not terribly upset about what the situation is. It ends up Kevin McCullough misses the front end of the 1-1, and from that point, the writing's on the wall. They have to start fouling because there's 21 seconds left in the game, and K-State's able to hit their free throws and walk away from it. Kansas showed their flaw again, that they're a very talented team, a lot of dispersed scoring in the game. Their defense isn't really where it needs to be, and without that freshman, Furphy, which is the big 6'8" Australian that came in this year that was, kind of deciding to say he was going to stay in Australia and play professional ball. But then when Kansas offered him, he thought this would be too big of an opportunity for him to improve his stock, and he definitely has improved his stock. but he goes 2 for 7, only puts up 4 points in the game, and it ends up costing Kansas to not have that extra input of one more player, and they lose the game. But a good game, and just, again, shows you how tough the road is in the Big 12. It was kind of funny to see that the way the game ended was there was too many timeouts and free throws, and K-State students really wanted to storm the court, but because there was too much time in between when you knew K-State was going to win and when the game ended, they were able to basically block off and get everybody and be like, you're not storming the court because we don't want to get the fines and we don't want to do any of that, so don't storm the court. So they were able to basically get everybody in position, and you saw guys trying to get over the rail, and everyone's like, dude, you're not, if we show our hand early, they know what's happening, and they put all the guards out there. So it's funny to see K-State not be able to storm. The players and Jerome Tang went over and celebrated with the student section, though. So it was okay. It was okay. You don't need to storm the court and storm the field for everything. I know that's my old man take. I know kids today, they're like, we're storming the field. If we beat a top 25 team, storm the court. And Jerome Tang is the type of guy man, we're supposed to be I want to be a top 10, top 15 program. That's why I came here, to turn this into a top program in the Big 12. And, we're not achieving this year, but that doesn't mean you just storm the court all the time. You storm the court when you beat number 1. And I get you beat number 4 Kansas. It's your rival. I get that that's one you like to do when you're unranked, but did not work out for them. Hopefully, Texas will not be storming the court tonight against Iowa State. We hope they win, but hopefully you do not freak out and storm the court if Texas wins big over number 14 Iowa State. It will be a big matchup for Texas in this game. This is a game where Texas is the betting favorite. They may not be the favorite across the board. It is a pretty evenly matched up team here in Iowa State. Really, one of the big pieces you're going to have is Tamin Lipsey. He's a really good defensive player. You assume they're going to probably put him on Max Abmas. Now, unlike what happened in last game where Micah Peavy was able to get on Max Abmas, he was bigger and kind of just took him completely out of the game. Ball denied him. I think they'll try and ball deny Max Abmas some in this game as well, because it did work for most of the game. Luckily, Lipsey is only 6'1", so he's not going to have a huge size advantage that they had over Texas, that TCU had over Texas on the weekend. But he will try and ball deny Max Abmas as much as possible. You may see Max Abmas bringing the ball up the court a little bit more. But this is, again, one of the things for Texas that they need to continue to work on as the season progresses. And Max Abmas especially needs to continue to work on, because of his size, because of what he does. He needs to watch Steph Curry film and watch Steph Curry off the ball and realize I need to move off the ball like Steph Curry, because I'm not big enough to go out and push my way over and get these balls. I'm not big enough to push around. And if a guy's in my face, I need to be able to move and tire him out and use my stamina and use my abilities in other ways to be able to get the ball and then be able to become a factor in the game. And if nothing else, I'm creating havoc by running across and having guys set screens and switches and do whatever else I can do. But moving without the ball is going to be key for Max Abmas as this season continues. And that goes to Rodney Terry too. I'm not going to not criticize Rodney Terry. That goes into Rodney Terry and the coaching staff to continue to find ways in practice to get him to move without the ball, setting screens on the back end, especially when you're talking about Dylan Mitchell or when Caden Shedrick comes in the game, or Brock Cunningham, those guys setting baseline screens when they're under the post and letting Max Abmas come back around. Those types of plays are going to be big for Texas as the season goes on, to get him open, to get him a couple of more good looks. Not the looks where he's shooting from 8 feet behind the 3-point line. I know he can hit that, but it's not a high percentage shot, and not one you want to take in a game where you're playing against teams where these are going to be decided by 2 or 3 points. If you're shooting that, if that's a 10% shot or a 15% shot, you shouldn't be taking it unless the shot clock's running out. So you want to be able to get him higher percentage shots, and by doing that, you're going to have to keep setting those screens. As for Dylan Mitchell, another big matchup for him. He's going to have to get out there on Trey King and keep him down, and then he will probably have some matchups as well with Milan Momcilovic. I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. We'll find out tonight if I'm anywhere close. But he is a 40% three-point shooter. They will most likely try and bring him out. He's 6'8", so you can't really put Kendall Weaver on him. You may put Kendall Weaver on Trey Young because he's a little bit less of a scorer. We'll see how they move Kendall Weaver and Dylan Mitchell in those places. who's going to be on them the most and try and ball deny and get them out. But this is another place for Dillon Mitchell. If you put him on there, his rim protection is going to go down a lot because he is a three-point shooter. You can't leave too far off of him. They'll drive the paint like everybody knows against Texas. They don't have that rim protector in the paint. They don't have the Jared Allen or the Mo Bamba or one of those guys that Texas has had that's been really good in the past. They don't necessarily have that this season, so people are attacking, going after guys. You also have to look at Robert Jones in this game. Robert Jones, 6'10". He's a 36% free throw shooter, but he still gets to the line. And it's a problem if you're going to match Robert Jones up against a Dylan Disu, who has gotten into foul trouble in multiple games. He's also a really good rebounder. So he is a really, really good rebounder. Even though Robert Jones is shooting 36% from the free throw line on the road, if he keeps getting Dylan Disu in foul trouble, they don't care about the points. They want to put Dylan Disu on the bench. So Dylan Disu, if he's on Robert Jones, which you assume he will be early, he is going to have to step up and box out and play really good defense from a guy who gets a lot of second chance points for his team. That'll be another key matchup in this game, is making sure that Dylan Disu has Robert Jones boxed out and doesn't get silly fouls against him when Dylan Disu goes up and misses one and tries to get the rebound but doesn't have an angle, and Robert Jones falls over, or Robert Jones just comes into the paint barreling and is able to get those calls. That's where you have to worry about it for Dylan Disu. They're going to be coming after him as well. You also look at Keyshawn Gilbert. He's a 6'4", 14 points a game, but he has a flaw that he turns the ball over. So you're going to want to ball pressure him. If you put Tyrese Hunter on him, when you may be able to do their leading scorer, he's giving up a little bit of height, but you're going to want to pressure him and trying to force him into bad decisions, force him into dribbling into other pressure, force him into making hard passes, because he does average 3 turnovers a game. And that's something you're going to look at in the scouting report and try and figure out a way to get Tyrese Hunter up in his grill and trying to get him, or whoever you have guarding him, and get him kind of out of his game. Kendall Weaver may switch over on him some too. Kendall Weaver is just a little bit bigger than A. Smith and Tyrese Hunter, so you tend to put him up in a lineup that has a couple guys that are going to be a little bit taller. And another name to mention for Iowa State is Curtis Jones. He is the off the bench. He's the energy guy for them off the bench. They have to continue to keep him under wraps as well when he comes out. Don't let him be a spark to ignite them and give them a run that every run against Texas is just – Texas doesn't have that margin of error this season. They don't have enough talent on this roster. They have talent, but not enough and enough depth that you can really allow 2 or 3 or 4 big runs from another team, because you're just too tired to keep fighting back out of those holes. So you have to be careful with what you're doing. You have to be careful with the turnovers. Those need to come down after the game with TCU as well. Turn the ball over way too many times in that game. But this is going to be a point for Texas, another point where you have to hold home court. They've been really good. They've been the best Big 12 road team, but they have not been the best Big 12 home team by a long margin. They need to fix that against a good Iowa State team. This is a team of offense versus offense. I know Texas wants to pride itself on defense. It just hasn't been able to do it this season. With the rim protection problem, it kind of leads to, if you play too tight on the ends and guys are just able to kind of get around you, and either you have to foul them or they get an easy road to the bucket and get an and-1. And it's been a fatal flaw of this team that there's no real solution to, because if you go big, you can't space the floor, and so you're dead offensively. You kind of have to take the good with the bad. You hope that there's not always these stretch bigs that keep coming over. Emmanuel Miller we saw against TCU. They did a good enough job of rotating over. You're going to see those rotations on defense. When Dillon Mitchell helps in, you cannot leave. You can't leave one of their guys open. You're going to have to continue to move the ball well for Texas in this game, and move defensively well, moving off of screens. They're going to try and get to the rim. Everyone is going to try and get to the rim the rest of the season against Texas, whether it's with bigs inside, where you go against a Kansas and Hunter Dickinson, and those guys are going to pound you inside, or you could look at, Houston, where they're just going to drive the paint on you over and over again and make you back off and then try and hit threes in the second half. That's kind of the game plan to beat Texas at this point in the season. And without a dominant rim protector, and with trying to keep Dylan Disu out of foul trouble, you don't necessarily want him to come over and help as much. You need Dillon Mitchell to do it, but you need Dillon Mitchell's perimeter defense as well. He gets stuck in that middle point. When he plays really well, when we saw him play like an NBA player against TCU, then that shows you he can have that ability. He needs to be able to do it from the beginning. Because again, an Iowa State team that has a lot of potential to put up points, this needs to be a 40-minute game for the Texas Longhorns tonight. They can do it. They've shown the abilities to do it. You need to offensive rebound well. This is not the best offensive rebounding team. Robert Jones is their main guy who goes after them. So you're going to be able to go after that. You have to be able to, you want to offensive rebound, but, leak your guards back. Kendall Weaver has stepped up in that starting lineup. Let's see if his progression will continue. We'll see if they go 7 to 8 man tonight, or if they stay with that, if they go the 8 or 9 man, if Chris Johnson gets to run any in this game tonight against Iowa State. But it's a tough road. It's a tough road for the Longhorns. They do get to be a little bit happier that once you get through this game, then you're playing a weekend game against West Virginia, and then you have the next week off until the next Saturday. So this is the game. Go put it all out there. There is no reason to rest too much in this game. I know West Virginia beat Texas at West Virginia. Texas lost to West Virginia. I'm aware of that. They need to stop that. Like that, you have to get retribution when they come to Texas. We know that. You can't look past that game. I don't want to look past that game. But we also know this is a big, big matchup for Texas, because at the end of the day, when we look at the Big 12 and the losses that Texas has suffered and the problems that Texas has had, they're still 2 games out of first place in the Big 12. They're by no margin out of the Big 12 picture right now. Now you can't have those little slip-ups later in this, that you've had before. You can't drop 2 in a row anymore. You can't do those things. You have to be able to go pick up a lot of, unprobable wins. After the West Virginia break, it gets hard again real quick. You're going to have to play Houston on the road and Baylor on the road and Tech on the road. There's Kansas on the road. Like, there is some hard matchups coming up at the end of the season for this Texas team. So you need to get wins like this tonight at home at Iowa State. You have to be ready from tip-off. And that has been one of the biggest problems. I'm not sure we'll see it tonight because we haven't seen it all season. Now they've shot well off of tip-off, but defensively the effort has not been there. Rebounding, the effort has not been there in the first 3 or 4 minutes of any game. So you need to have that effort step up. You like the shooting to be there too, but you want to see the defensive effort step up again. They're going to attack early. They're going to attack often in the paint. Texas, you have to withstand that and keep coming back for more against Iowa State. Elsewhere in the Big 12, BYU, number 21 BYU is going to Oklahoma. This is an Oklahoma team that was ranked, doing pretty well at a non-conference. The Big 12 has beaten them up pretty badly because they just don't have the offensive weapons. And, even in the Big 12, you have to be able to play some defense. And so everyone plays defense. Oklahoma still plays good defense, but they don't have the offensive pieces to get it going for them really, really well. And it's hurt them so far, but it is a home game. Can BYU's offense travel and score on the road? We'll see tonight if BYU gets another big road win in their quest to win the Big 12 in their first season in it. And we can look at Texas Tech. Is number 23 Texas Tech is at number 13 Baylor. Baylor is 11-1 at home. It is a hard place to win there in Waco. This is a game where Texas Tech has shown in the games they've lost, they've tried to trade baskets. Their defensive presence has lapsed, and they rely on Pop Isaacs too much. They rely on trying to trade baskets. Baylor's not a great defensive team, but you can't, in the Big 12, on the road, pretty much anywhere, try and trade baskets. You have to get an edge defensively and have your defense travel to have any shot on the road in the Big 12, because once you start trading baskets, it becomes really difficult when you miss a couple and they hit a couple to get that comeback in the last 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 minutes of a game. You have to be able to get those shots down. That's what's happening in the Big 12. All right, we're going to push NBA back a little bit, so why don't we get to the big fat poll of the day so we can get you guys involved on the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
So I want to have a little fun, and I want to have a question for you guys because I'm curious about this as someone who's been to many, many Super Bowl parties, many watch parties for games, and it always feels like there's a right amount of people, and I'm not sure what it is, but there feels like there's a right amount. There's an amount that it's too small, because then it's like, if it's like 4 people, then maybe it's not enough, because then if one of the guys isn't really into it, now you're cheering, and then you can't have, it's the conversation, and then two people are having a conversation, and then you're like one other guy, and you're trying to watch. So I don't know fours if it's like if it's too few, or if you go too many, and then you have 25 people, and then there's 18 different conversations, and you're trying to watch the game. So this is the question, and it's different for everybody. But I want to kind of get a poll for my guys here on for everybody listening, my guys, my gals, who everybody's listening on the sports complex. What is the right amount of people for a Super Bowl watch party? What's the right amount of people at that party? Now you can say, I don't want to watch with anybody. I'm going to sit and watch a game by myself. That's how I watch it. And I'm not saying every game, because I get Texas games I think are different. When it's your team and you're really going into it, it's a little bit different. A Super Bowl watch party, I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. But at the same part, if I just sit at home and watch the Super Bowl, the fanfare of it all and the enormity of it all, it kind of loses something just sitting in your room or sitting in the living room by yourself. So I enjoy watching with other people. What do you think is your amount? And you can give a range like 10 to 15 or 5 to 10. What is your amount? Or you can say 0 to 5. You can say I don't want that many people. I want more snacks. And too many people is too many snacks. But I think I know where I'm going this year, and then there's going to be lots of snacks, lots of food. Because I know who's there, and I know I'm bringing stuff. It's going to be great. But what is the right amount of people to watch the Super Bowl with? Right amount of people for a Super Bowl party? Let me know on the text line, 512-447-3776. If you want to talk college basketball, we can get to that as well. Anything else, you can get to that on the text line, 512-447-3776. All there on the text line. We'll get into some great sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie when we come back here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back in the sports complex here on the Horn, musical theme of the week, playing Super Bowl halftime artists throughout the years. We'll keep those going throughout the week until we get to a 5-1-2 Friday. Some Paul McCartney, a classic performance there at the Super Bowl halftime show. Not I don't know if it may be top 10. It's not top 5, but it's got to be top 10. Paul McCartney, the Super Bowl halftime show. We'll have some others that I think are top 5. Some others that were top 5. We'll be in there and we'll be on the list for sure. We'll keep the party rolling. Text line's open 512-447-3776. If you got any thoughts about Texas basketball tonight, college basketball in general, NBA, college football, signing day is tomorrow. If you want to talk about the poll of the day, what is the right amount of people for your Super Bowl watch party? What is the right amount of people to have to watch the Super Bowl with? Let me know that on the text line. I want to play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B, getting you ready for signing day tomorrow. Mike Craven was joining Aaron Hogan this morning. From Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and he has some good insights. Him and Aaron talking about signing day tomorrow. It's not a huge day for Texas, but it is. It's a big day for college football still. It's not early signing day. That has become the big one, but another big day. I'm sure Sark's going to be speaking to people tomorrow. We'll try and have some sound for that for you tomorrow. But here's some Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
Yes, sir. Mike Craven is hanging with us. He is the senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, also my co-host on the Eyes on Texas podcast. We're going to be recording a new episode of the EOT this week, and we'll be talking a lot, Mike, about National Signing Day, even though there may not be a lot to talk about. But, Steve Sarkisian has a 10:15 availability tomorrow, which will be happening right during this show in the 10 o'clock hour to talk about the entire signing class and kind of double back on some things. They're not expected to sign anybody tomorrow. But they obviously have 18 players already on campus, the early enrollees to go with the portal additions, 8 of them. So you're talking about 24 new players or 26 new players already on campus for Texas right now from last year that are either portal additions or high school players who are already here. That means 5 of the 20, so 5 are still left to join. And we'll hear Sark talking about that tomorrow. And you're headed down to College Station tomorrow.
I am.
To cover, because it does feel like Mike Elko is his first National Signing Day, has more newsiness happening.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Sark for a whole week at the Sugar Bowl. We've kind of done the Texas thing. He's been there for a few years now, so not as many hires in the staff. But, for Elko, it's not only the signing class, but he'll talk about why he picked Colin Klein as his offensive coordinator, why he went the way he did defense, what he was trying to do with his staff, what he's trying to do with the enrollees and the transfers. I think they have over 22 transfers, that are coming in. I think what's interesting about, I used to be the recruiting guy at the Statesman, so I worked at Rivals for a long time, so recruiting is kind of like my secondary love. And back in the day, I know I'm not that old, but back in the day, if you signed 22 players and 4 of them were early enrollees, that was a pretty decent amount of early enrollees, probably a couple quarterbacks or something. Now, out of the 22 players Texas has signed, 18 of them are already on campus. Much less, waiting for that secondary signing period. So what we thought of as National Signing Day, 5-10 years ago is no longer National Signing Day. Early signing period is really National Signing Day. This is just for a few stragglers and some guys who maybe got out of their letter intents because of coaching changes. And for the state of Texas, the biggest story is Terry Bussey, the athlete at Timpson, who won a state championship there in the 2A level. He's been an A&M commit forever. LSU making a real run at him, and so that's going to kind of dictate the happiness or sadness in College Station tomorrow.
What has been to your realm, since you cover, we cover Texas and here on the Horn, and a lot of Longhorn conversation on the daily, but Texas A&M, you cover all the schools in the state for Dave Campbell's. What has been the buzz for Mike Elko in his first month on the job, or however long it's been now?
Yeah, I think it's been mostly good. I think the staff he's put together, just kind of football dudes that kind of go with that blue collar mentality that he's trying to bring. I think that's what Texas A&M fans want their football team to be. They want the defense, they want the wrecking crew, they want the smash mouth running game and the big offensive line. I mean, that's traditionally what Texas A&M football is about, kind of being the antithesis of maybe what Sarkisian's doing here in Texas with the fast and the fun and the exciting offense and stuff like that. They kind of want to get back to that R.C. Slocum style of football. And they talked about that during the process. I think that's why Mike Elko ended up kind of being at the top of their list in terms of replacements. And so I think so far so good. There's that honeymoon period, right? I mean, they opened the season against Notre Dame at home. And so, they lose that football game, and he's going to figure out what happens in College Station when you lose football games, just like all coaches do when they finally get their first loss. But I think right now, Everybody's enjoying the staff that they put together, and I think he's put together a pretty excellent transfer staff. It didn't have a lot of stars. Like, they lost an Evan Stewart, they lost a Walter Nolan. They're not going to bring in guys that have those kind of recruiting or even the guys that have those kind of draft prospects. But they brought in a lot of really good football players with a lot of production at other places, and a lot of times have more than just 1 year of eligibility left. And I've always heard coaches talk about you recruit for potential, you portal for production. And they've portaled a lot of guys who have played college football that you don't have to guess whether they can handle it or not. They already have.
Yeah, and so some of the levels, but what are they going to be come SEC competition time? That'll be the question for them as you develop. But yeah, if you can play football, you can play football. We're watching Max Asmus in basketball playing at Oral Roberts, but he's one of the best cards in the Big 12 too. Because if you can put the ball in the basket, you can put the ball in the basket. And I do think it's interesting because Rod talks about this a lot because Rod is a football theorist, self-proclaimed, but he actually is. He loves to study the theories of football. And I'm just reading a story in the New York Times this morning about Kyle Shanahan and his bunch formations, right? His condensed sets that Rod has taught us about for show after show, which is, essentially for years the spread offense that was run was designed to create space. What Kyle Shanahan has been on the forefront of is condensing those sets and then using the empty spaces to create the leverage. And Rod talks about all the time in the bunch formations and condensed sets and things. It's just but you always want to be on the forefront of that, right? You always want to be. That's what a football theorist, as Rod says, does. And to Sark's credit, when Sark got here, he's admitted he studied the teams that were making the Final Four. Mm-hmm. How are they constructed? How are they built? What are their what traits do they have? Well, they all had really good quarterback play. So let's rebuild our quarterback room. They had great big offensive and defensive lines, so the big humans. And and they had speed. They had speed everywhere, especially at wide receiver and then on the outside. And that's not like rocket science, but it is good to study what's winning and what's winning in your conference and what type of teams. And that's what he has set out to build at Texas diligently: big humans, speed, and quarterbacks.
And Texas A&M would add one more to that. That's defensive-minded coach.
Okay.
Right? You look at the Kirby Smarts, the Nick Sabans. I mean, there hasn't been a head coach who's the offensive play caller win a national championship, I think, in 20 years. Maybe one. Maybe Jimbo Fisher, I think, is at Florida State, is the only one since the 2000s that's had a play caller be the head coach. And so it's been – now some of that's coincidence, right? Alabama, Georgia, like a lot of the places that win national championships, they have to have a defensive coach. But that was what A&M was looking for. That's why Mark Stoops' name popped out there, initially. They want a defensive-minded coach who can follow that same Georgia, Alabama route to success. And they think they found that with Mike Elko. Time will tell. But that's kind of – they were doing that same thing, trying to do an autopsy of, hey, let's look at the last 10, 15 teams that have won a national championship. What are some common denominators? One of the things that they found was a defensive-minded head coach.
Well, to your point, I mean, Sark can't make himself a defensive coach, and he was hired, but he hired Pete Kwiatkowski. And, much like we heard earlier this morning, Dan Quinn, the new Washington coach, talking about why he hired Cliff Kingsbury, he said anytime I went against him, he gave me fits. I mean, he was hell to stop, much like I thought of Kyle Shanahan when he hired Kyle Shanahan in Washington. So Dan Quinn saying, I've always had my eye on Cliff if I could ever bring him, and now he's coming to Washington. And that's what Sark said about Pete Kwiatkowski, is that, whether I was, he was at Boise State or he was at Washington, whenever I went up against PK, man, that guy gave me hell. And to that point, you bring in a defensive coordinator who you really trust, and the way the Longhorns have built this roster, it started with the offense. Let's be fair about that. Sark is an offensive guy. It started with the offensive line, started with quarterback, started with speed, and now, as Rod and I have talked about a lot, and it's time to get to the defense. And PK's being able to assemble the pieces he needs to run his defense. I think for the first couple of years, it was really using guys that maybe didn't fit what he wanted to do, so he'd kind of mold it. Now, go back to when he was at Washington. It was the 2-5-4 defense, right, or 2-4-5, however you wanted to do it, or 2-4-5. So two big, sturdy tackles who just hold the point. And then 4 linebackers that are hybrid players. They can do a lot of different things. They can edge rush. Think Colin Simmons, think Ethan Burke, think these guys that can put their hand on the ground and rush, but also can get after it. And then traditional linebackers, which they want, and I think Jalen Ford last year. This year it'll be Leona Lafau and these others. And then really versatile big defensive backs. that can cross-train, play safety, disguise coverage, play corner, and now you're with these last couple of classes, what you're seeing Pete Kwiatkowski build on defense and into the portal with a guy like Andrew Makuba, a guy like Trey Moore coming in from UTSA. It does feel like PK's now getting to build his side of the ball a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and football is cyclical, and defense has to be reactionary in a way, right? And I remember when Texas A&M joined the SEC, and Johnny Manziel kind of ran all over that conference. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart kind of looked around and go, okay, we're too big on defense. Our linebackers need to get faster. Our safeties need to get faster. The spread is coming. It's going to be all across college football. It's not just a Big 12 thing. And they reacted to that, right? Well, football is becoming positionless. Guys like Kyle Shanahan are creating offensive football where your running back can play wide receiver, your wide receiver can play running back, your tight ends can split out, right? And so you have to counter that defensively and come up with defensive guys who don't just play one single thing, that they can play in the nickel, they can play in a 4-3, they can play on the edge, they can cover a little bit. And that's going to take a little bit of time to build the trust on, because Sark had immediate trust on the recruiting trail as an offensive guy.
Yep.
All right. You have to build that, for somebody like Kwiatkowski. That's not a household name, especially in Texas and in the Southeast. They had to build that trust over years. I think they have that after a few years of playing really good football, especially after making the college football playoff. And you've seen the caliber of defensive player start to match the caliber of offensive player that they've been recruiting the whole time.
Well, and you can see it with this year. I mean, they're going to have 4 really good linebackers that can rush the passer, but can also drop into coverage where they need them. They will have edge players and Colin Simmons and Colton Vasek and Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrells. And then what they really are looking for is those big defensive tackles, and that's why getting the kid from Arizona to come in, Sadir Mitchell needs to develop. Alfred Collins needs to have a really good year for them up front. Vernon Broughton up front. So, but then, man, you can see where that secondary is going, where you're going to be. Derek Williams should be a star. The big, rangy, cover like crazy, the long arms. They call him the Raptor. To go with Andrew Makuba and Jahdae Barron, two 5-1-2 kids who are good buddies. That's a really versatile set of safeties who can do a lot of different things in coverage and up and support the run and create plays. And then you've got the corners on the outside and Manny Muhammad and Terrence Brooks. I mean, that can really cover. And that's obviously the plan to moving into the SEC. You want to be versatile, where you can be big and physical when you play a physical run team. That's why the addition through the portal of Kendrick Blackshire from Alabama is big, right? He's a box linebacker, which box linebackers don't play a lot, but you will play some teams. Michigan, week 2, that you need a box linebacker that can saddle up, take on a fullback, and play traditional football. That's when you get really good because you can kind of mix and match depending on who you're playing on your schedule week by week.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to learn so much about the state of Texas in the first 2 weeks of the college football season. I mean, A&M starts with the game against Notre Dame, then Texas goes to Michigan in week 2, so we're going to figure that out pretty quickly. But yeah, I think if you're Texas, you feel better about the talent on your defensive side of the football than you have since, probably Mack Brown was on campus, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's been a
Will Muschamp.
Right. It's been a long time since you could look at the 2 deep on the defense and just go, okay, well, that's a dude. How you even get that guy on the football field, right? Like they have those issues now where you start looking at the backups pushing the starters for a long time. There wasn't a ton of depth to push those frontline players, and it's probably why they didn't perform as well. There's not as many guys behind you to kind of make you raise your game up a little bit. And so I think Texas is finally getting into that on the defense. They've had this on the offensive side of the ball the last couple of years. I think finally on the defensive side of the ball, that young talent is going to end up being better than some of that older talent that was experienced and kept their spots, but now they're getting replaced by guys with much higher upside.
Yeah, well, and I think to the secondary point, that was the frustration of all Longhorn fans last year, was the safeties and coverage, and that's because they had safeties who were. They had strengths, but they also had a weakness. And when they were on the field, the offense would attack their weakness. Yeah. And they didn't have a set of safeties that could do all the things, right? So they kind of they would have a tell. Okay, they're planning for run here because they got their run safeties on the so we can go deep and go pass and try to get them in one-on-one coverage. This is what you're trying to disguise on the defense, and you're right. They do have more players pushing, and that's this is to your point of you recruit for the future, but you portal for you recruit high school for the foundation, you recruit the portal for needs and for production, and Texas absolutely did that. I know, how many total portal players did A&M bring in? Do we know? Is it 15 or 16? Maybe more. I know Texas.
Oh, no, it's 20. 23. 22, 23, something like that.
Well, because they had a lot of guys of their own into the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Like Texas lost 13 through the portal, but added 8. which real good attrition for the Longhorns. But the 8 that Texas brought in, all, I mean, especially a wide receiver and tight end, I mean, they can be immediate impact because, you're bringing in, 3 really good receivers, and then Nyblack, the tight end, who's not JT Sanders, but he is a vertical threat in the passing game. This Texas, you just said it, the defense should be more versatile and deeper. The offense is going to be more explosive next year than it was this year because Jaden Blue is one of the fastest running backs in this league. It's going to be he and C.J. Baxter. What a thunder and lightning combination that will be. I saw our friend Chip Brown had a report the other day from 24/7 Sports that one of the scouts he talked to says that Jahdae Barron has a Jahmyr Gibbs kind of skill set just with the outright speed. And so if you combine a big back and a little back, and then you've got speed everywhere, because last year with Texas in the receiving game, your one speed guy was X-Man, your route runner was A.D. Mitchell, and probably your red zone guy. Jordan Whittington was a running back out there, and then J.T. Sanders became your really biggest matchup problem. Well, you're gonna have 4 guys out there that can run, like really run. Like, okay, we're going to overwhelm you with speed. When you're going Matthew Golden, Bond from Alabama, Silas Bolden coming in from Oregon State, to go with Jonte Cook, and then you had Amari Nyblack from Alabama, the speed tight end. You mean that because defensive coordinators are terrified of speed.
Oh yeah,
terrified of speed. And if you can if you consider Jahdae Barron with the speed he's going to bring, that's a really fast offense with a really good quarterback and what should be an experienced offensive line. That's pretty scary.
I think Sark has really put on, we've talked about this on the podcast before, I think Sark has really put on a masterclass on how to build a roster in modern football with the portal. He's done it like the NFL, and I think some of the experience he had in the NFL around roster management helps him because you use the recruiting from high school like you use the NFL draft. And then you use the portal like you would use free agency to kind of just fix a couple of the spots that maybe you whiffed on the recruiting, or it didn't work out, or that guy transferred, or the guy you really think is going to be your next whatever is still a freshman or a sophomore and just hasn't developed quickly enough. You go get that guy to bridge that gap. You go get a Trey Moore on the edge to bring you instant production while those other young guys like Colin Simmons maybe grow up a little bit and become 3-down football players. You're building the plane as you're flying it right now in college football because everything is so new. Nobody's had to do it this way before. But I think we're going to look back in 10 years and realize that Sarkisian was one of those coaches that got it early, that understood how to do it early. And Texas has benefited from having somebody in charge that has seen NFL rosters, that understands free agency, because that's all the portal is. If you start looking at the portal as if it's NFL free agency, in my opinion, it makes a lot more sense conceptually as a fan. Yeah, and as a coach, and you don't want to overuse it because anybody that follows the NFL knows if you're overusing the free agent market, that means you're overpaying. Exactly. And that means you didn't draft well because you're having to fill too many holes. If you're drafting well, and to your point of the high school recruiting, Kelvin Banks is your left tackle. This year they're bringing in Brandon Baker from Mater Dei, who's a 5-star, who when Kelvin Banks moves on to the NFL next year can slide over and be your left tackle, right? You want a left tackle, you want a quarterback, you need pass rushers, you need speed. And yes, he's doing that through the high school ranks as the foundation and then plugging holes through free agency as we know it as NIL. And yes, Texas has deep NIL pockets. That helps for sure. But at the same time, the one thing I've said consistently about Sark since he got here and we started covering him, he doesn't bellyache about stuff. Like, I'm sure there are things about college football he hates, like a lot of people do, the Dabo Swinneys of the world, but he doesn't complain about it. I mean, there's just nothing you can do. You have to compete in this realm until they get it fixed, right? And I can say I don't like it, and he'll probably say it tomorrow with his press conference. He's got availability. But, I still have to work within it and maximize it to the best as we can as it's getting fixed. You said the plane is still being built here, but those who embrace it and are like, okay, I may not like this all that much. I wish it was different, but I'm not. I mean, Dabo Swinney to this moment has still not added a transfer portal player, not one. Yeah, like he's like just being adamantly stubborn about it. Well, is that what's best for your program? Because Clemson's already sliding, guys, and you're not adding any pieces when there's really good pieces available. And if you're a Clemson fan, you have to be driving yourself crazy because you're a program that kids want to go play in because you've won recently. They were growing up, you were winning championships, and you're not even using that brand and trying to use that as an asset to say, man, we could fill some holes here. Nope, that's not how it should be.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with E and Rob B. Weekday morning 6 to 11. I believe Rob Baber's back tomorrow, but always good when Mike Craven joins Aaron as well. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. Hit the text line 512-447-3776. If you got thoughts about Texas basketball tonight or the poll question, what is the right amount of people to have at your Super Bowl watch party? What's the right amount of people? How many people do you like at your party? Is it small? Is it big? Let us know. And if you want to talk some NFL, some Super Bowl, some college football, some college basketball, whatever you want to get into, let us know on the text line 512-447-3776. We'll get into that when we come back from this break here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back in the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a Tuesday afternoon, playing Super Bowl halftime performance artists all week long. Well, my voice just starting to go out. That's great. We're going to keep the party rolling. Text lines open 512-447-3776 on the text line. I got a couple people asked about what I said at the beginning of the show that have been going to the gym, but then there's people that I'm like, all right, well, I'm just trying to hit like 2 or 3 machines, just try and go every day and get a little in, and and there will be people that just seem to be on their phone on the whatever machine or doing whatever, and you're just like, I kind of need to get where you're at, and I'll be there for like 10 minutes max, 5 minutes probably. I'm pretty quick and out because I'm trying to keep my heart rate up, so I'm trying to do it. I'll be quick. But the advice now, I appreciate the advice, guys. It says just ask how many sets you got left. Another one says just ask how many sets they have left. That usually gets them moving. I appreciate that. I may try that. I normally stay away from. My normal tactic is to stare at them until they look back, and then I look away. I don't know if that's the right way. That's my normal one, but I might have to change that up. Texter says, for our poll of the day, how many people is the right people for a Super Bowl watch party? And I know it differs for everybody, but I'm trying to poll you guys to see what you guys do. And text says, I have about 20 coming to mind. We do it right with the potluck. This year's theme is red. I think that works. Both teams are red. Is it red for one team, Texter, or is it red specifically Chiefs, or is it scarlet red, or is it red because both teams have red and you said red works? They both have red in them. I mean, that it works. Red is you're always rooting for a winner if you got the red. I think the 49ers are technically scarlet red, but it still works. Right Guy from New Mexico says, it all depends on where the party is going to be at. If I'm going to be at my buddy's studio apartment, then no more than 4 people. If I'm going to my father-in-law's 4-bedroom house, I'd say 8 to 10 people, but no more than 12. I will tell you, this is a technique I've used. And this is a thing I started doing at Super Bowl parties 15 years ago. I would get a projector and a screen and put them up in the backyard. Now, I know it's supposed to rain here on Sunday, so I may not be able to do it this season, but it was a big thing where I would put, and I've done it before earlier with the TV in the backyard, but it was a key. What I would tell people was like, if you're in a small room trying to enjoy the game, and then somebody there who's annoying and they're yapping on about whatever, or they're the ones who are like, it's all rigged, or they're yelling about it, whatever it is, it's annoying you. Then you need another place to go. So I always put one in the backyard, and then once you open up the backyard at a lot of these places, it then opens up the house a lot more, and then you're like, okay, now we can have 20 people here, and it's not so bad. But I agree. If you're all kind of in one room, you do have to limit it a little bit, or else no one's moving around. And then you have that weird part where there's just one dude. Like I was saying, Jim, there's just one dude that's over by the queso, and you're like, dude, you've been at the queso for 20. I can't even get over there now. I don't want to stay over there. I just want a few chips of queso, and you're ruining it. The whole party's ruined. I like queso. We're going to take a break. We come back. We'll have more of your text messages. We'll hit the top of the hour. We'll talk. We got NBA talk. We have Super Bowl talk. We got a whole lot more coming up in hour 2. And, of course, more of your text messages. Keep sending them in here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex. Got some more NBA if we want to get into that. We got some NFL Super Bowl talk coming up as well. National Signing Day is tomorrow. And the text line, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. We're asking you, what for you is the right amount of people at a Super Bowl party, a Super Bowl watch party? How many people do you like at your party to watch the big game? I know it's different than, watching Texas play in a big game, because the Texas game, maybe you want a few less because you really want to focus. You want to make sure you can't have riffraff coming in that's only there. They don't really watch sports, and then they kind of ruin it for you. But the Super Bowl, people are watching the ads. It's nice sometimes at a Super Bowl party to have the person who's there for the ads, as long as they get that, it's going to be, because they'll point out and they'll be like, hey, watch this one. And then when I'm taking a break to go get another beer, then I'm, oh, that's a good ad. I'll watch that one, and then we can talk about it tomorrow. So I think there's a good amount. I'm more in the range. I think around 20 is a good number. Depending on our guy Rye Guy in New Mexico brought up a good point that depending on the size of where you're at, it's very important. 20 people in a studio apartment, probably not the best solution. Maybe a noise complaint coming from that one, so a good point there. But we're asking you that question. We'll get through more Super Bowl party stuff, because I the Super Bowl party, as someone who is a Houston football fan, grew up with the Oilers, didn't have a team, and then now a Texans fan. I have never watched a Super Bowl with super intent on who wins or loses. There's times where I'm rooting for somebody, but most of the time I'm watching it as a football fan. So I enjoy the Super Bowl watch party because it's a big game, the specter of it, the grandeur of it all, the halftime show or the ads, everything about it is better when there's a lot of people and you can really enjoy make it feel like a big event. I think it makes it better than just it's like watching the Avengers or watching, Fast and the Furious on a small little TV with the sound real low. It loses something. Or watching Godzilla just on your phone. It feels like a thing that you want to be like, oh, no, I want to be around people, and we can all just be like, oh, my God, this is great. So that's what we're asking you on the text line, 512-447-3776. If you want to talk Texas basketball, big game against Iowa State. That was in hour 1. We talked about that. But if you want to talk about that anymore, we can talk about that. NBA, the trade deadline is Thursday. National Signing Day is tomorrow. And, of course, the Super Bowl is on Sunday. Going to be a fun time there. Text line working hard for us there. We'll get back to that in just a minute. I do want to bring up one thing about the Super Bowl. We'll kind of just keep touching on the Super Bowl until we get to Thursday, Friday, and then maybe we'll go a little bit harder. Thursday may be a fun show. I believe I'm going to be on the morning show as well, helping out in the morning show. So I may be completely sleep deprived and crazy by Thursday. We may have Aaron or Rod step in too in the afternoons with me to help me get me through 2 hours after, doing radio stuff for 12 hours. I don't know. We'll see how that Thursday show goes, and then Friday we'll give you even more Super Bowl talk. But one of the pieces that I've been looking at is we're kind of trying to break down different pieces of the Super Bowl and what pieces maybe, are the most important matchups, the most important edges for each team, what needs to be provided in these games for each team to win. And what I want to look at today is the running backs. And this goes two ways, because it goes to running backs and the rushing defense for both of these teams is why these matchups are so valuable and why Christian McCaffrey and Pacheco are going to be such big pieces of this Super Bowl game. And I believe both coaches will have their guys going full speed. Pacheco, Andy Reid has been using Pacheco in the running game so far in the playoffs. He's been trusting him. He's been using him, and he has been a big part of the Chiefs being able to pace the game. And when, you're getting pass rush on Patrick Mahomes, or he's not being able to find a guy because they're doubling Rashee Rice and they're trying to stay after Kelsey, Pacheco gives them a little bit more space that they have to sit back in the run game a little bit more. So he's been a big piece for their offense. And, of course, we know McCaffrey throughout the entire season into the playoffs. There's a very good case for him being the MVP of the league, being on possibly the best team in the league. And just such a huge impact that I know Brock Purdy got all the talk about it. They lose a couple games, one which they were sitting everybody in. And that kind of knocks him out. And Lamar Jackson's probably going to win it on Thursday. That's another thing happening this week is the NFL honors this Thursday. But that does mean that Christian McCaffrey is a huge piece of what the 49ers do. And we know Christian McCaffrey, one of the big pieces that you're going to find for Christian McCaffrey is not just that he is, he averages 5.4 yards per carry. That's a really good number. The bigger number is 8.4 yards per reception for Christian McCaffrey. That number is the big number because when you look at the difference between him and Pacheco, Pacheco's doing well. He averages 4.6 on the carry, 5.5 in through the air. So he's being used out on screens or little ditches off and check downs. He's doing okay, but not necessarily breaking big plays. Christian McCaffrey is breaking really big plays out of the pass game. And the way you're able to do that is by continuing to make him a running threat so they collapse down in the run, and then he's able to sneak out when you don't. And maybe people don't pay attention to him in the passing game the same way. He's able to get that little bit of space the same way that they use Travis Kelce. Christian McCaffrey kind of falls in that role, and I know George Kittle does too. But Christian McCaffrey can fall in that role of just finding space and then being able to run in it. And then when we look at the defensive side of it, when we look at the teams that the 49ers have played so far in this season, why Pacheco is going to be a huge piece in this Super Bowl is if we look at what kept the Packers in the game against the 49ers, it's 22 runs and 5.6 yards per carry. 22 runs by running backs is what I'm counting. And Aaron Jones running for over 100 yards in that game. 5.6 yards per carry. They were able to get the runs, and Aaron Jones is a heck of a running back. He went over the top, and he was the reason the Packers stay in this game. Jordan Love had a fine game, but it was Aaron Jones why the Packers were in the game with the 49ers. And then you look at the Lions. They have 27 running back runs for 5.1 yards a carry. You can run against this San Francisco team. And yes, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Aaron Jones are really good running backs. Pacheco has been playing really well this season. So Pacheco has a chance to get in there. I don't know if he's going to average 5 yards a carry, but I think when you look at all the weapons that Kansas City has and knowing that they have to help out in the linebackers to help out with Travis Kelce as much as possible, knowing you don't want to give Patrick Mahomes too much time, the run game may be there for Pacheco, and he's going to need to produce at that 4 to 5 yards a carry range for them to be successful against this 49ers team, because if you run the ball more, then it hurts that pass rush of the 49ers. And the more you can hurt that pass rush, the more time it gives Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce to go make magic. And we know what those guys can do when they get a little bit of time. So that's something you want to look for on that end. And if you look on the other side, why McCaffrey's so important, because when you look at the teams the Chiefs have been playing, the run game hasn't been there. The Dolphins go 14 runs with running backs, 3 yards per carry. And reality, it's even probably less than that because Mostert had one big run in the game. So that knocks it up a little bit. But, Achane did nothing in the game. They only run the ball 14 times. I'm sorry, 14 times that game, 3 yards per carry. Dolphins can't get a win, can't compete. The Bills do a little bit better. They run the ball 25 times. It keeps them in the game. It puts them a lot closer to the Chiefs. They get 4 yards per carry with James Cook. Also Josh Allen runs the ball 12 times. I'm not counting that in our numbers because we're talking about running backs running right now. But they run the ball 25 times. They're the closest to beating the Chiefs. They're the ones who are hanging in there. They're the ones that kind of have this figured out against the Chiefs. They run the ball 25 times, but they only get 4 yards per carry in that game. You need to get that number up. How do you get that number up? Christian McCaffrey. And then we look at what the Ravens did. They run the ball with running backs 6 times in the game. Only 8 times with Lamar Jackson. But 6 times in the game, they only average 3.8, and that's the number that should be less because Gus Edwards, I believe, had a 15-yard run. And if you take that out, the average is abysmal of what they were able to do because they didn't stick to it, they didn't go with it, and they didn't have a top guy. So we can say, yes, Mostert and James Cook and Gus Edwards are not the running backs that we can say are the same as Aaron Jones and Montgomery and Gibbs. We can say, though, that's clearly one side and the other. So the running game may not be that much of a difference. But if we talk about what it meant to the teams and in the matchup, Christian McCaffrey having a good running game, being able to get going against this Chiefs defense that has done well so far in the playoffs, not with the same caliber of player, but they've done well defending it. That opens up so much in the world for Brock Purdy and opens up his time that they can't pass rush the same way. They can't blitz the same because you constantly have to be worried about Christian McCaffrey, and not only in the run game, but then in the pass game, that even if he runs through and it's not a run and it's a play action, Christian McCaffrey can scoot right out, and when everybody realizes it and turns away and jumps off McCaffrey to go back for Brock Purdy, all he's got to do is ditch the ball right off to Christian McCaffrey, and he can go. That difference is why you think the 49ers have an edge here, but Pacheco is a huge piece for the Chiefs because the closer to the game that he has to Christian McCaffrey and taking that X factor out of the game, or at least equaling that X factor on the other side, will be a huge coup for the Kansas City Chiefs as this game goes on. So that's just our look for today, looking a little bit at the Chiefs about how they can possibly spin that they don't necessarily have the same talent level. They clearly have the better quarterback. You don't bet against Patrick Mahomes, I know. But if we just look across the board of offensive weapons, clearly the 49ers have the better offensive weapons. But Christian McCaffrey, you have to have Isaiah Pacheco make a difference to get closer to Christian McCaffrey. We know he's going to do what he does in these games and do what he does all season long. But can Pacheco kind of equal that out and even the playing field and make it come down more to a quarterback battle and a battle of the throwing games? Because if you get down to that, if you're able to keep up with the 49ers in the run game and pace the game and not give them more possessions and pick up first downs and go hard on money downs, those types of things, giving yourself second and third and shorts because a good runs up front for Pacheco, it evens the game out for the edge that the 49ers have had most of the season with the running game with Christian McCaffrey. If you can equal that out with a good game from Pacheco, it makes it much easier for the Chiefs to get a win in this game. Tell me what you think on the text line, 512-447-3776. We'll go through more positions clearly as the week goes on. I want to get back to the text line, though, real quick. Texter says, I would think more than about 6 to 10 and conversation can overshadow the game. Social event for some, I get it. Props to you for hitting the gym. Remember, number one rule in Zombieland, cardio. Yes. I get some people don't want to go too far to overshadow the game. But again, this is a game, and I'm pretty good at being able to keep up with the game and still be able to do other things. I can have conversations while I'm staring at a game and watching what the game is. I know not everybody does that. But at the same point, in these games, I'm not going to be breaking it down in the most, because it's we'll talk about it on the day. We'll talk about it on Monday after the Super Bowl. But I'm going to try and enjoy the Super Bowl. I enjoy sports. That's why I do this job. So, if I'm sitting there and just trying to break it down and have my notepad out and writing down, well, this happened there. So I can go back and I'll rewatch games and I'll have it recorded on my TV so I can go back and watch it and figure out the points and go back to points that I knew were big. But I enjoy having a few more than 10. I get smaller rooms. You don't want to have more than 10. But I also, if you get down to like 6 to 10 and there's one annoying person at 6 to 10, it's all over. It's all over. That's why I like having a few more people, because then you can be like, well, they'll spawn off. And that people of 8 can go off and have their own good time in one of the other rooms. And the party I'm going to, there's 3 rooms with TV and a TV in the backyard. So there's a little bit more space where I'm going. So, they can go to another room and they have their fun and we can go over to where we're going. The most annoying part for me at every Super Bowl party is when the Super Bowl halftime comes on and somebody's like, everybody shut up. And you're like, you can't say everybody shut up for this when we didn't shut up for the entire game. Like, there's going to be some conversation happening, at least by song 2. By song 3, for sure. We're going to be like, cool, it's Usher. Usher's cool, but I don't know if I'm going to be super attentive for it. We'll see. For the person who said the theme was red, with that many people we're covering both teams. Red makes it easy, and we're serving pictures of Bloody Marys all game long. Got a dedicated room with a 120-inch screen. That is a big screen. I'd say still put another TV somewhere in the house so you can sneak away if you need to. The other TV's a big piece for it, I'm telling you. And man, I don't know if I could do Bloody Marys for a whole game. I think that's an intro. Like the Bloody Mary is 1, maybe 2, and then I'm just straight beer. But I think you've got that figured out too. I'm guessing if you've got all this done, I think you're probably somewhat of a pro of hosting these parties. I'm going to believe in you. My man Nate says, not sure you should be working out with your finger injury. It's still, my thumb is still hurt, by the way. It still is. It's much better than it was. It's still hurt, Nate. And it's just gross looking now, but it's still hurt. That ingrown thumbnail. Hard injury, but I'm sticking it out, man. You know, I'm a fighter. I'm not one of these players who only shows up for, 40 games a season. No, I'm a fighter, Nate. I'm going through it. Texter says, just start giving them tips on how to do the exercise. They'll move on real quick or you'll get beat up. I don't think I'll get beat up necessarily. I don't think that would be the case. I think I'd get more looks. Also, everyone wears headphones at the gym, so you have to say everything like 2 or 3 times, which is always a little bit more annoying when you're like, hey, and then they look up at you and then look away again. It seems like a problem, but you know what you got to do. Joe, the bass player, says, like sounds like you're gonna hang out with a bunch of riffraff. Probably, Joe. Probably. That seems to be where I end up a lot. My man Chan says, no, PD, don't do that at the gym. How many sets is left is a good icebreaker. I don't want to break the ice. I want him to move. I'm not making friends over there. I just need him to move. Channel says, think Kendall Weaver should start tonight. Do we match up well with ISU? Yes, Kendall Weaver should start for the rest of the season. IT Horton just hasn't been able to hit a shot. I trust Kendall Weaver to shoot threes as well as IT Horton at this point of the season. So yeah, I mean, if we're going to play, it sucks that you just don't have the rotation. I think, you want to be able to figure out one more guy to put in that rotation. But yeah, I mean, I think you still start Kendall Weaver because the defense he brings and the energy he brings is huge. KC's pass defense is also better. It's going to be a challenge for San Francisco. Unfortunately, it is. Their defense is really well, and teams have been not running against them, even though I think you could run against this San Francisco team if you stick with it. The Bills did pretty well against it. I mean, they only averaged 4 yards per carry from the running backs, but I think you could have kept going with it and kept going, but they just got behind it and had to start throwing it more. And overall, KC's defense is better than San Francisco's. Steve W. versus Steve S. It's going to be a challenge for San Francisco, in my humble opinion. I appreciate that, Chan. I do think it'll be a challenge for both teams. San Francisco, I think, is a more talented team, but Kansas City just has that feeling that they can keep playing at that, and you don't bet against Patrick Mahomes. That's what you say. And yes, so you also said this is about Sam Marcus Russ. Okay, we'll put your name in there. I appreciate you. By the way, if you don't have a name and I ever say your text, you just put your name and say like he just said Sam Marcus Russ, and I'll go put it back into the database and we'll get to it. Living room, 77-inch and secondary, 65-inch. So yes, alcohol will be flowing. I like that. I think you're a San Marcos guy. You know how to party. I know how it is. If you're down San Marcos, you know what you're doing. Text line still open, 512-447-3776. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back, get to the text line, and get to another Ian Robbie replay with a guest they had on this morning, Josh Harris, talking some NFL draft. Some good stuff there. So we'll get to that when we come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back in the Sports Complex here on the Horn, playing artists who played the Super Bowl halftime show all week long. This might be one of the tops because it was super early before they really had people doing solo performances. Michael Jackson's pretty legendary performance there. I do like on the text line, Sam Marcus Russ did say we did drink a stadium dry. I'm telling you, once you said that, it clicks in my head what you got going on. And Texter also says, is the UT game really only showing in the Longhorn Network tonight? That's what my sports app is showing. Yes, it is on Longhorn Network tonight. I apologize if you do not have Longhorn Network. I'm sure that it'll be on at establishments. If you can afford to get out or you can get away from the house, you can go watch it. One of the establishments, Longhorn Network will not be, I do not believe will be around next season. So this will be one of those last games that you will watch on Longhorn Network. But yes, it is on Longhorn Network tonight. If you get someone's login on ESPN, I don't condone any of that, but if you get someone's, you can go on the ESPN app, and if you get the right login for TV provider, I'm sure you can find it too. All right, I want to play this sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie, a little replay that Josh Harris, sideline reporter for the Houston Texans, came on the show this morning to talk about the NFL draft. What Texas players will be involved in that. Some good stuff from Hook 'em Up on a Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
All right, it is Behind the BOC. Rod will be back tomorrow from his wisdom teeth extraction. But in Rod's absence, what better pinch hitter than our man John Harris, sideline man for the Houston Texans for years and years, also works at HoustonTexans.com, but also publishes a draft guide every year that is as good as they get. You can find him at J Harris Football on X/Twitter, and you can hear him on our conversation whenever we can get a hold of him and talk with him. He's our buddy John Harris. Hey, John, how are you? Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it's been a while, Aaron. I hope you're doing well, and hope everybody in Austin's well. It's been a pretty exciting fall for those wearing the Texas orange.
Yeah, man. Well, it was a good fall if you're a Longhorn fan because you kind of turned a corner. And for you, suffering through some pretty miserable years with the Houston Texans, I mean, it's your job, and you show up and do a great job of it. But, man, there were some tough times in there. But, man, what a breath of fresh air. D'Amico Ryans, C.J. Stroud, and just this it's hard to imagine the 180 that organization did, in a calendar year. Yeah,
for it to be so immediate was shocking even for us. I mean, it started, with the decision to sign D'Amico because, Mark Vandermeer and I would sit during kind of the period of not having a coach. We'd sit in the studio and we just kind of talk like, okay, we wouldn't even talk about D'Amico because we just didn't even think it was possible. It was always, this permanent plan B, like, okay, we all know D'Amico is the guy we want, but all right, we know that's not going to happen. So who's it going to be? And then I ended up going to the Senior Bowl, and I ended up driving there, I think, on a Sunday. And that's when things started picking up with D'Amico. And, I'm in Mobile, and I'm texting Mark, like, is this thing going to happen? Like, come on, man, this can't happen. Like, and I think that was just kind of the PTSD from the last 3 years. We just couldn't, it was the proverbial, we couldn't have anything good. And then, it's happening. First day of the Senior Bowl, I've got people coming up to me 1 year after, as I walk through the gates, people are snickering because I'm wearing Texans gear. Like they're laughing at Texans. Like they literally, I could hear them laughing as I went by, and I'm like, okay, well that's got to change. And now all of a sudden it's like, man, D'Amico, like, yeah, this is a great step. And then you just started seeing every single step seem to be right. They signed some free agents. Like, wait a second. On the same day, they signed Devin Singletary and Dalton Schultz to 1-year contracts. Like, who? We signed Devin Singletary and Dalton Schultz. Okay. And then you obviously get to draft night, and CJ's drafted, and you have this, 20-minute period or so where we're debating what they're going to do with number 2. J. Stroud. We're reacting to having a young quarterback that I liked. Look over and the producer is looking at us going, hey, they're trading up for Will Anderson too. Like, wow. So it was all this that was happening, but it's like, okay, now that was great. But now growing pains. We got a rookie head coach, rookie offensive coordinator, rookie quarterbacks coach, a rookie quarterback. Face the franchise defensively as a rookie. Okay, yeah, okay, we're gonna 5 wins, 6 wins. Yeah, that'd be better than last year. We'll be much more competitive, et cetera. Out of the gates, the first 2 games, and like, oh man, and it was the Colts game that was really frustrating because we felt like the Colts, and they kicked us around. Like, man, what are we gonna do? And then all of a sudden, the season changed in week 3. You had obviously some great offensive play, but you got a little bit of luck. You realize, okay, you can play. DeMeco's having an impact. There's a positive vibe that's going through this building. And you realize what all of that was worth. And you just kept playing, and you won some magical games throughout the year against Tampa Bay and Cincinnati. And you look up, and it was the Cincinnati game where, I'm in the locker room and I'm like, holy cow, like, I think this can happen. Like, just a playoff run. I think a playoff run can happen. I think we could get into the playoffs. And I think we can get there, and then obviously CJ got hurt, and we're like, oh, man, those 2 games were tough, but beat Tennessee with Case Keenum. I mean, come on, man. Is this thing real? Beating the Browns, we beat the Colts on a Saturday night, the first time we played a primetime game. It's the first time, Aaron, we played a game that was not noon. And on the first play of the game, CJ goes 75 yards to Nico and thought, are we going to get in the playoffs? Okay, we got the playoffs. Then Tennessee helps us out. We win a division, and then we get the Browns here, a bit of revenge. We ran into a buzzsaw with Baltimore. They were rested. They were ready. And we didn't play our best game that night. But when you consider where we were last year at this point, we had just gotten DeMeco Ryans hired. We didn't even have a staff. We had, trying to figure out what the roster is going to be. And we went from that to right now, obviously when the Super Bowl's over and you start thinking about 2024, we're going to be the flavor of a month for a lot of people. There are going to be a lot of people going, hey, man, they're doing things down in Houston. We got cap space. We still got a first-round draft pick. We've got 7 at quarterback. Will Anderson made the Pro Bowl. We've got, offensive line, which needs a little bit of tweaking, but 3 of the 5, the 3 best guys you have are under contract for the next 3 years. So you've got the ability to do some things, but now you're dealing with expectation. Now you're going to play primetime games. Now you're going to play Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore all in the same season, whereas last year you just played Baltimore. So you're going to have to rise up in those games against teams that are really, really good. You're playing first place schedule. It means you play Dallas as well. So it's going to be tougher. You're going to rise. That said, you wake up each day from here on out, you got a top 5 GM, you got a top 5 head coach, and you got a top 5 quarterback, and that's a hell of a place to start.
Yep, and a lot of young talent and an offseason now to get even better if you're in Houston or all the teams now. That's the draft process with John Harris, Houston Texans Radio Network, but also Jay Harris Football and the must-have draft guide that you pour your guts into, John. It starts in Mobile. I know it starts with you with the film, watching their college film, but then you get to Mobile and you get to see them up close. Let me start with the Longhorns, and just from this same perspective you just gave with the Texans, that, man, from 5-7 for Coach Sark to 8-5. The 5-7 year they had nobody drafted. 8-5 they had the running back, so 4 or 5 guys got drafted last year. This year the Longhorns could have as many as 7, 8, 9 guys drafted over the 7 rounds of this draft, and some of them pretty high. Pretty good job Sark and the staff are doing, acquiring talent and then developing that talent. Of all the Longhorns, whether they were in Mobile or not, who do you think is the best draft prospect they have in this class in 2024? Is it Byron Murphy or is it somebody else for you?
I think it's Byron Murphy, and sometimes, and this is where I have to stop myself and make sure that I'm not looking at it through Texans goggles. But obviously, Byron Murphy would be a guy I would love to have in Houston. His twitch, athleticism, power, the strength he plays with, how his technique he plays with. I mean, he was exceptional this year, and I think he would fit very, very well with what DeMeco would want to do and wants to do defensively. And we have some defensive linemen that contracts are up and they've got to make some decisions, and so Byron Murphy would be a hell of a draft pick at number 23. Now I don't know that he ends up getting to 23. Feels like that's the best guy. Now Xavier Worthy is Xavier to me is a top 40. He's in the top 40, and I say that because this is such a good. I mean, it borders on historic wide receiver draft class, and I feel like we've been saying that for a while. And it really, if you kind of just follow the trends of the game of football, you realize more teams in high school are putting 4 receivers on the field. Well, that translates to college where they're putting more 3 and 4 wide receivers on the field, more 11 personnel. And that translates to the NFL where you see a lot of 11 personnel being played 3 and 4 wide receivers. So guys that used to play corner or would move to running back are staying at wide receiver, and they're flourishing at wide receiver. And I mean, I was in Mobile where at least a half dozen guys, I'm like, you can come to Houston, you can come to Houston, you can come to Houston, you can come to Houston. And I'm not, and those guys, I'm not even talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell. I mean, I'm not even talking about those guys. Guys, I mean, they weren't even in Mobile. You know, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan from Washington, the entire Washington wide receiver group. I'm just talking about Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley from out of Western Kentucky. You know, the guys that were at the Senior Bowl were fantastic. Yet, group that wasn't even there, you know, of underclassmen that declared and guys that, you know their top 10, top 15 picks and, you know, didn't really need the boost in the Senior Bowl. This wide receiver class is outstanding. So that's why I think Xavier, I don't want to say in any other year because the receiver class has been pretty good, but in a lot of quote unquote normal years, Xavier probably is in the top 20. Last year, he's probably in the top 20. He probably goes maybe a shade after JSN, but you would debate Jordan Addison and Xavier Worthy all day long. So he would have been in that mix, but now it's in this group. So that's why I think Byron Murphy ends up being the top-ranked corn. I think Worthy's right there. You know, Mitchell's going to be interesting. You know, they're at the Senior Bowl kind of talking to some scouts about, players and such and talking about these receivers. And when Mitchell's name came up, talking to one scout, and he just kind of looked at me like, play. Like this, and I said, what? And he was like, I don't know. There's something about Mitchell. And I thought, okay, that's kind of odd. We'll keep an eye on that. But again, Adonai Mitchell ended up here in Houston. He'd fit perfectly right in between Tank Dell and Nico Collins. He would be the perfect fit in this offense between those two. Longhorns are come with a lot of ammunition to the draft, and I haven't even brought up T'Vondre Sweat, who was in Mobile to do the weigh-ins, and he walked by the scale and just waved at it like, see ya. So he didn't even weigh in. He just decided, what you see is what you get sort of thing. And then he went out on the field, and there were moments of, what did he just do? He just took Bo Limmer and broke him in half. Like, is Bo Limmer okay? Can he get up after that? And Sweat had a few of those moments, but he also had a couple of those moments where, why is that guy blocking him as effectively as he is on this play? And so there's kind of an Albert Hainsworth vibe you get a little bit with T'Vondre. Like, they're dominant. They're dominant moments when T'Vondre wants to be dominant. And where T'Vondre has to get to is probably about 340, 345, because I can promise you that it was not 345 in the Senior Bowl, or he would have stepped on a scale. And he still dominated at 365, 370, whatever he is. But he got himself to 340, 345. And the reason I know he can get there is because he was a defensive end in high school at 255. That was the first I ever saw it, was that when he was at Huntsville, he's playing a playoff game here at NRG Stadium. And I said to, a couple of the recruiting guys I was watching with, like, hey, who's 44? And they're like, oh, that's T'Vondre. Who T'Vondre was. Oh, he's going to Texas. And I was like, he's good size, 255, right? Yeah, he's about 255, 250, somewhere in there. And then he gets 2-3. So I know that 340 is in, he can get there. And if he does, I think T'Vondre can end up being a 3-down player in this league and be a really good one because his power and athleticism are freaky level. So Longhorns are going to have a really exciting day one, day two. All those guys that we just mentioned, guarantee are going to be drafted Thursday, Friday. That before the end of day two, you're going to have those guys in particular drafted. And that is going to be an indication of where this program is going, that there are 5-star players going to Texas, and Sark is getting them there, and then he's developing them. And that is the biggest thing. Once you get the recruits, it's a matter of can you develop them. And that is absolutely what he's been able to do with those prospects there. And that, if I'm an NFL scout, I keep going back because I know that I'm going to get a well-coached kid I'm going to get a pretty disciplined kid, and I'm going to get a guy that knows football and has been developed with great coaching throughout the years. That's what I want in my program. That's what I want in my organization. And I think it's just going to continue to happen. And it's just going to be this big snowball that rolls downhill for Sark at the University of Texas.
John Harris with high praise for T'Vondre Sweat at 255 at Huntsville High School, now playing about 365 at the Senior Bowl. Byron Murphy as well. Hey, let me ask you about Jonathan Brooks. I know he's coming off the injury, but, man, he was such a dynamic player, and what a revelation for the Longhorns with Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson to the NFL. Who was going to replace those guys? And Jonathan Brooks, before the injury in Fort Worth, was having a hell of a year, maybe on his way to a Doak Walker Award. And, you know, it's a lot of high rank. Mel Kiper had him number one on his running back board. What do you think the league's going to do with Jonathan Brooks coming off the injury?
You know, it's interesting you say that, Aaron. You know, I was going through my notes for the Senior Bowl last night, and when I got to T'Vondre, well, it actually wasn't T'Vondre. I got to Austin Booker from Kansas, and I remembered something that a buddy of mine told me. He said, I had watched the Kansas-Texas game, but we were on the road that week, and so I didn't get a chance to watch it, you know, study it. And so we were talking about Austin Booker, defensive end, outside linebacker from Kansas. And he goes, hey, go watch the Texas-Kansas game and watch Austin Booker give Kelvin Banks all he can handle and Christian Jones all he can handle. And they did. That was legit. Like Austin Booker, number 9, long arm, skinny defensive end, outside linebacker, was all over the place. He gave those tackles a ton of issues. But as I'm watching that game, I'm watching Jonathan Brooks closely, and I'm like, God dang it. If he doesn't get hurt, RB1 board. I don't even know that it's close. Like I said this in Houston last week when I was on the radio. We're talking about, and with the Texans, there's, you know, the running game was not good, and so do we reset the running back room? What are you looking at running back wise? And so the first thought is, well, okay, you draft one. I was like, love this draft class. I really don't. Who's RB1? You know, is it Blake Corum from Michigan? I like him. You know, he's got great vision, but hey, Will Shipley from Clemson, I'm not sold. Dylan Johnson from Washington, okay, he played pretty well in Washington's offense. He's got some things. Okay, man, he maybe. And then I'm watching Jonathan Brooks last night, and I was like, that guy is RB1. But the ACL obviously complicates things, and I just don't know exactly how teams look at that. And 32 different medical teams that will have the 32 different medical opinions to Brooks, and how that shapes how the teams are going to look at him in the draft process. And that's where I'm up in the air. You know, if he's healthy, in my mind, as I'm watching, he's running back 1. I think he's got everything you're looking for. Just watching that Kansas game and seeing, you know, the cuts he made, the different types of runs. I mean, there's kind of a Le'Veon Bell sort of pace, you know, when he's running some of the split zone stuff that they were running, some of the inside, you know, gap scheme stuff. It has a little bit. Now, Le'Veon got to a point late in his career where he'd run up to the line of scrimmage and stop and wait and then go. It's not quite that. But earlier in his career, Le'Veon was patient, and that was probably where Brooks is. But there's that patience. And when he sees that, he has the vision. When he sees it, he goes. And I watched it last night, and I'm thinking, man, I'm talking to Aaron tomorrow, and I'm gonna say exactly this. And he's RB1.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie and John Harris joining the show. We're going to take our last break. We'll come back and wrap it up. Big news for Astros fans. We'll tell you that when we come back and wrap it up here on the Sports Complex and the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, we got to get out of here. But before we go, big news that just broke. Jose Altuve has signed a new 5-year extension with the Astros, meaning he'll be with the team through 2029. Basically, verifying he will be an Astro for the rest of his career. Great news there if you're an Astros fan. One of the fan favorites of all time, Jose Altuve, going to sign and stay with the Houston Astros. His contract was up after next season. All right, we'll be back tomorrow, talk more, recap what happened in Texas basketball. We will get into some more Super Bowl talk and a whole lot more here on the Sports Complex. But until then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for more from the Sports Complex.